Hey, my name's Andrew, and in this review, we're talking about the Fujifilm Insta Mini Evo. This, in my opinion, is the best Polaroid camera that you can get for two reasons. Number one, the retro body style of this camera. It is super fun to use, and everybody seems to want to have a, retro looking camera. So that checks the box and makes it really fun to use. But number two, this is a hybrid camera. And what that means is this is actually a digital camera. You can take a photo and you can view it on the back of the camera. Then if you like how it turned out, you can print it. A lot of people nowadays have Polaroid cameras like this. And in comparison to the Insta Mini Evo, this one, you turn it on, you'd select the different setting. Is it a cloudy day or is it a partly cloudy day? I don't know. Let's take the photo, boom. And you don't really know if it's perfectly in frame. You don't know if you've selected the right settings. And oftentimes you'd end up with a photo that's really overexposed. So really white and bright and everything's washed out, or underexposed. Everything's really dark. You can't really tell what's going on in the frame. It just looks black. Personally, I always just looked at those photos and thought, well, that's just how a Polaroid camera is. You kind of just get lucky sometimes when they turn out really good. And then that's just kind of the magic of, oh, that photo actually turned out. That's great. In comparison to a regular Polaroid camera, this one's super nice because you can take a photo, and then if you really like how it turned out, then you print it. If you don't, you can retake it. So that ensures that you're gonna guarantee you're gonna get a lot, 100% of the photos that you print are gonna turn out. And Polaroid film is pretty expensive. I mean, if you're gonna take a lot of photos, that's gonna really add up. So ensuring that those photos that you're taking are gonna turn out good, I think actually ends up being that you're gonna save money in the long run. And speaking of money, this camera is coming in at $200, and that's maybe some turn off to a lot of people. That's a more expensive Polaroid camera. But in this review, I'm going to talk about how the camera works, the pros and the cons. And by the end of this review, I'm hopefully going to help you decide if that price tag is worth it for you. So now let's talk about how the camera works. So on the front of the camera, you have an on and off switch. You have a big dial on the front of the lens that you can turn. We'll talk about those settings here in a minute. But you also have a reflective panel. So if you were gonna take a selfie, you can kind of line that up since there's no screen on the front of the camera. And then there's a button right there that you can press to take the photo. There's also a flash, and that's pretty much everything on the front of the camera. On the right-hand side of the camera, you have a little thread here for like putting it on a tripod. On the left-hand side, you have a little slot where the photos will come out of the camera. On the bottom of the camera, you have a little flap here. You open that up. That will allow you to install a micro SD card or plug in a USB-C charger to charge the camera. Then on the top of the camera, you have another dial. There is a little reset button. We'll talk about that again in a minute. You have a shutter button, and then you have the print knob. And this is super satisfying that they added this. In order to print your photos, you turn this little, almost like a film advance, and boom, it prints your photos. So that's super cool that they added that little element. It makes it really fun and retro, just like the rest of the camera. On the back of the camera, there is a screen, and it's not a touch screen. You will have to control it with this little dial here on the bottom. On the front, there is a dial that controls the different fun modes, I'm gonna call it. Then on the top, where your left-hand thumb dial is, you can control the filter mode. So in combination, you can adjust the color of the photo and the different fun dial to get some different unique style shots. So you can experiment with a double exposure or a half frame or a vignette. All those different things are super cool that they included that in this camera, and you can experiment with that and get some unique shots. For review's sake, here's a photo I took when I was at the beach. I'm gonna pull down on the lever, and it is going to print that photo. And then as it's loading here, you'll see the Polaroid animation is going up, and out comes the Polaroid. But that is how the camera works. And now let's dive into the pros and the cons. So number one pro, the thing that attracted me to this camera, and I'm sure you too, is the really cool retro style of this camera. I'm sure everybody nowadays really wants that retro feel, and Fujifilm is obviously the best at having those retro vibes, along with the film advance lever to print the photos. Just the overall experience with this camera is super fun. Number two, you can pair this to your phone and print some photos. Like say you've taken some photos in the past that you really like and you want to have those in Polaroid film. Well, you connect your phone and you're able to then print those photos on Polaroid film. Now a couple cons. I wish, as much as it looks nice and retro, it doesn't have that retro feel because it's plasticky. And it's not a bad plastic feel, like it doesn't feel cheap, like it's gonna fall apart, but in comparison to like an old film camera that's made out of metal and it's like heavy and it feels real, this kind of feels a little bit more cheap, if that makes sense. Number 2 con is it's a little tricky at first pairing your phone to the camera. It's not like a super easy pairing process. Once you do inevitably pair it and have the app, everything set up, it is easier, but the initial process, I remember feeling a little bit like this is a little bit clunky. So those are my pros and cons. And now onto my final thoughts. So the question at the beginning of this video was, is it worth the $200 price tag? As I mentioned, compared to a traditional Polaroid camera where you just kind of hope the photos turn out, I think the biggest feature about this camera is you can guarantee that that expensive Polaroid film that you're gonna buy is inevitably gonna result in some good quality photos. And I would say the biggest thing, like the biggest reason I would recommend getting a Polaroid camera like this is because in an increasingly digital world where everything is digital, shared, on Instagram or Facebook, having tangible photos is a great way of saving memories and literally sharing experiences. If you're with your friends and you print a photo and you're able to just hand that to them, I think that's just a super special element to life that I think our generation is starting to lose. We're becoming a digital world. So I would say it is worth the investment for the fun of it. It's a retro looking camera. It works well. And I would say for the $200 price, yeah, you could buy a cheaper Polaroid camera, but being able to make sure that your photos are gonna turn out in the long run and be able to share those experiences and they're not gonna be really washed out or really dark, that's the biggest reason why I'd recommend this camera. So at the end of the day, it's your decision. If you do wanna pick this up, there is a link in the description. If this video was helpful, drop a like, and if you have any comments or questions at all, leave those in the comment section below and I'll get right back to you. If you do wanna see other budget gear reviews, consider subscribing, and if you do, I'll catch you in the next video.